Or your instruction on the law. However, do listen closely to their arguments. They are intended to aid you in understanding the case. Each side will have equal time, but the state is entitled to divide this time between an opening argument and a rebuttal argument after the defense has given its closing argument. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This case was about killing for the sake of killing. He told detectives, I've already done it once. I'll do it again. But it's not about that he killed. It's about how he killed. Blunt force trauma gained compliance for submission. Strangulation for silence. According to him, it only takes 2 minutes. He doesn't get scratched. He doesn't get hurt. They don't yell. They're quiet. They can't get away even if they wanted to. He's too strong. Those are the people he goes after. On the 7th of October of 2019, he went after Kristine Melton. He went after Melissa Montanez. And he went after Diane Ruiz. Only one survived that day. Only one. Why? Because there was too many people around. But if you remember what he said, he would have killed her too if given a chance. Now, what I expect the court to do is give you a series of instructions. What we need to prove to you that he did everything that we've charged him with. We've charged Mr. Wilson with first-degree premeditated murder. We need to prove that Kristine Melton is dead. There should be absolutely no doubt in your mind that Miss Kristine Melton is dead. You heard from the medical examiner. You heard from Miss Christine Johnson. You even heard from Mr. Wilson himself. Kristine Melton is no longer with us. The second thing we need to show is that the death was caused by the criminal act of Mr. Wilson. There should be absolutely no doubt in your mind that Mr. Wilson did these things. All of the evidence corroborates what Mr. Wilson has told you in the course of the past day or two. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, there was a premeditated killing of Miss Kristine Melton. And what's interesting about the premeditation instruction, it says killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing, and the law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant, and the premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. So, that's a lot of words. Let me make it simple for you. When one is sitting outside in the evening time, and it's humid out, and mosquito lands on your arm. You look down. You decide to kill that mosquito. That's premeditation, ladies and gentlemen. Because the law does not fix a period of time. It can go from that short period of time to as long as you want. Planning, whatever you want. But when we're talking about premeditation as it relates to Miss Melton, ladies and gentlemen, it's also going to apply to Mr. Ruiz. Strangulation is the epitome of life slipping through someone's hands. Premeditation starts by placing the hands on the throat of another. The application of pressure, squeezing the throat, not releasing until there is not one final breath that remains in that person. And what's interesting about that particular act, ladies and gentlemen, is that both people know that one person is going to die. So when Mr. Wilson decided to go ahead and inflict blunt force trauma upon Miss Melton, you heard about it. The broken nails, right? She was a fighter. She knew what was happening. We also know what? The lungs, the colon, the bladder. What else? The liver. You heard about the brain swelling from Dr. Coyne? She was alive when all that happened. Couldn't happen after she was strangled. And then what do we also know? We also have the compression of the neck. 2 marks. The deep hemorrhages that Dr. Hernandez talked to you about. Coyne and Dr. Hernandez told you that was all consistent with asphyxiation. It's another term for strangling someone, ladies and gentlemen. That is premeditation. That, ladies and gentlemen, is first-degree murder. Well, what do we know happened next? Well, we have to prove grand theft of a motor vehicle, right? Grand theft of a motor vehicle is Mr. Wilson knowingly and unlawfully obtained or used, endeavored to obtain or use a motor vehicle, Kristine Melton. You saw that black Nissan Versa. You know it belongs to Miss Kristine Melton. Her registration's in there. Her tags are in there. Her phone is in there. Stephanie Johnson identified it as her car. When did he use it? After he killed her. So, yeah, he unlawfully obtained or used her car. That element's been met. 2, he did so with the intent to temporarily or permanently deprive Miss Melton of her right to the property and benefit to it or from it, and appropriate that property of Kristine Melton to his own use or the use of another person entitled to it. Yep. Did that too. And 3rd, the stolen property was a motor vehicle. You saw it on Mr. Lukic's video. Rolled up in it. It's clearly a motor vehicle, ladies and gentlemen. I submit to you that charge has been proven as well. But where does he go to from there? Well, after he's gone ahead and killed Miss Melton and taken her car and held her face up to utilize her phone, he makes a whole series of telephone calls, right, to Miss Montanez. Hey, I need to see you. Where are you at? Calling her repeatedly, Slobodian told her, don't bring him here. Tell him you'll meet him at your spa. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's why we showed you the phone records. The 630-962-1256. Miss Melton's phone number. We also have Miss Montanez's phone number at 239-333-5924. And also what comes up later is this 239-200-8319 number. The reason why these phone numbers are important, ladies and gentlemen, is because when you look at the phone records of Miss Montanez, okay, on page 1 of 6, you're going to see the 200 numbers. You're going to see the 333-5924. You're going to see 333-5924. You're going to see Ms. Ruiz's phone number in Ms. Montanez's phone records. There is no reason why Ms. Melton, let alone Ms. Ruiz's phone, should be in Ms. Montanez's phone records. The only reason why we showed you that was to corroborate what was happening that morning. He was utilizing Ms. Melton's phone to contact Ms. Montanez. And not only that, ladies and gentlemen, is when he couldn't use Ms. Melton's phone any longer, and he got a hold of Ms. Ruiz's phone, that's when her number starts popping up on Ms. Montanez's phone records. It corroborates what Ms. Montanez was telling you. He is calling and he is repeatedly trying to get a hold of her. But what's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, is after he gets a hold of her, he just doesn't want to find out where she is or what she's doing. But what does he do? Tries to pull her into Miss Melton's car. He almost runs her over by getting out, attacking her, trying to pull her clothes off of her, beats her repeatedly. She's chased up the stairs. He held her up against a wall with her throat. He punches her in the face until blood spatters all over the place. You saw the photograph of Miss Montanez. You heard the testimony of Miss Montanez. You heard the testimony of Miss Slobodian. You heard the testimony of Miss Williamson. You also heard the testimony of Miss Griffin. There should be absolutely no doubt in your mind that he committed an attack or a battery upon Miss Montanez. And the only thing I need to show for battery is that he actually intentionally touched or struck Melissa Montanez against her will. There is no way that she consented to that. Absolutely, it was against her will. What was she doing? She was screaming. He was threatening. Fortunately for Miss Montanez, she survived. But if given the chance, she would have been dead. But there's too many people. At least that's what he told us. That brings us to his next victim, right? After he gets done with Miss Martinez, he takes off in that vehicle. It's too many people. He heads to Cape Coral. He comes across a young lady who's on her way to work, dressed in a light blue shirt, jeans, dark shoes. Lures her to the car by feigning to ask for directions. Somehow manages to get her inside the car. He breaks her nose. He breaks her thyroid and neck cartilage. He also runs her over repeatedly. Why? Because after he had choked her, he claims that she somehow was still alive because she also was a fighter, ladies and gentlemen. She had multiple rib fractures. Dr. Coyne told you there was no way left unattended that she would have been able to survive. And he ensured that that was going to happen, that she did not survive. Why? Because he's the one who placed her on that empty lot, under those shrubs, under that tree, to make sure that no one would find her. Luckily, when law enforcement was looking up in the sky and just happened to be in the area and they saw that single vulture that was circling, that's what led them to finding Miss Ruiz. And how was she identified, ladies and gentlemen? Jeez. She was decomposed after only a couple days of being out there. Insect activity, animal activity, weather. Her husband had to her fiance had to identify the ring. They identified her by the tattoo on the back. Diane Ruiz is dead. Death was caused by Mr. Wade Wilson. And there was a premeditated killing of Diane Ruiz. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, strangulation, placing the hands around someone's neck, and watching that life slip through the hands, and the other person seeing their life leave them. Premeditation. Should be absolutely no doubt in your mind that this was first-degree premeditated murder. He even told you in his statement, she was scared. She wanted to be dropped off. And if you listen real closely to his statement, he also said he knew he wasn't going to drop her off. He was going to kill her. He already had it in his head. Why? Because he already killed once before. He was going to do it again. And true to his word, he did. So, ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, we've established first-degree premeditated murder of Diane Ruiz. Where does he go from there? He goes to Joe's Crab Shack, right? Because Officer McCormick received information regarding the battery of Miss Montanez. He's confronted there. He plays dumb. He doesn't know anything about a battery. But what does he do? He leaves. He's not sticking around for that. Nope. Where does he go? He goes to Mateo Graphics. One of the other people he knows. Lukic. Hey, can you help me out? I need a plane ticket. I need a taxi. I need to get out of town. Why? Because I just killed people. I just killed some people. He was frantic. He only had a pair of pants on. Blood on him. No shirt. No shoes. Law enforcement gets there. What does he do? He doesn't stick around. He leaves. Where does he go? He goes to the Amlin residence, right? Unfortunately for Miss Amlin, she'd left with her husband back to Columbus, Ohio, and he's decided that he needs to do something, right? What does he do? He enters the structure owned or by or in the possession of Fanny Amlin. We know that. How do we know? You saw the broken window, you saw the screen removed, right? He gets in, he gains entry. At the time of the entering the structure, he had the intention to commit theft in that structure. Of course he did. He helped himself to some food, he helped himself to some drink, there was different clothes that were laid out. He needed to figure out what he's going to do. What does he do? Contacts his dad. Hey, can you help me out? I need to get out of here. Can you send me an Uber? I need your help. Dad's conflicted. Dad, fortunately enough, does the right thing. He contacts law enforcement. He contacts Mr. Wilson and encourages him to give the address and location of where he is. But while Mr. Wilson is in there, like I said, he commits petty theft because he knowingly and lawfully obtained or used or endeavored to obtain or use the property of Fanny Amlin. You saw the White Claw, seltzers. You saw the various food that was laying there. You saw the clothing that was laid out. You saw the backpack. He did so with the intent or injury affirmatively to deprive Fanny Amlin of her right to property or any benefit from it, or appropriate the property of Fanny Amlin to his own use or the use of any other person not entitled to it. He didn't have permission to be in there. He didn't have permission to utilize any of the items that were in there, and he didn't have any permission to do anything inside that residence, let alone endeavor to use it, obtain it, deprive Miss Amlin of it. Nothing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we submit to you, we've established burglary. We've also established theft. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 days, you've seen and heard a lot, okay? What we're asking you to do is to take all of that and put it together. We submit to you that you should only come up with one conclusion and one verdict in this particular case. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this case was never about Mr. Wade Wilson. It's about what Wade Wilson did to Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz. And make no mistake about it, despite his bragging, his boasting, and the excitement he wants to feel, this case was nothing more than a graphic, vulgar display of power. And we're going to ask that you find Mr. Wilson guilty of first-degree premeditated murder for killing and strangling Ms. Melton. We're asking that you find him guilty of grand theft of a motor vehicle for stealing and taking Ms. Melton's car. I'm asking that you find him guilty of battery for striking Ms. Montanez against her will. I'm asking that you find him guilty of killing and strangling Ms. Diane Ruiz and basically committing blunt force trauma by running her over and trying to make her look like spaghetti. I'm asking that you find him guilty of burglary of a dwelling for going to and breaking into the Amlin's residence, and also for petty theft for taking and helping himself to whatever it was inside that allowed him to do the things that he did. Thank you very much for your time.
first, on behalf of myself, Mr. Shirley, and even Mr. Wilson, I want to thank you for the attention you've given through these proceedings. I know there's been some portions that have been rather rough, so thank you. I want to get up here and I want to argue about premeditation. I mean, we're not arguing whether these ladies are dead. We're not arguing, but the premeditation. First off, let's go through the timeline. He and Jason Shepard meet Miss Melton and Amy Slobodian, I think her name was, at the Buddha. He goes home, leaves Melissa Montanez, his girlfriend, there, takes her car, and apparently Jason drove them back to Miss Melton's house. They have sex. They have consensual sex. Jason Shepard said so. And then something happened. I suspect it was the drugs. Shepard was saying, oh yeah, we were doing cocaine, just not my cocaine. That was for me. Well, if you listen to the statement that was played yesterday, Mr. Wilson talks about using flocka. That is not good stuff. Puts holes in your brain.
Objection, facts not in evidence.
Sustained.
Anyway, at some point between 2 and 4, maybe, Miss Slobodian leaves and something goes wrong. Miss Montanez described it. Killer eyes, 2 black holes, no soul, as she put it. Kills Miss Melton, wraps her up. Why? Rather than premeditation, I would submit to you that the judge is going to give you an instruction on second-degree murder. And one of the, or also known as depraved mind murder. I don't think anyone can argue that none of this was not depraved. But in order to commit second-degree murder, there must be an unlawful killing by an act imminently dangerous to another, no one's arguing that, demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. An act is, quote, imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind, end quote, if it is an act or a series of acts that a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, no question about that, is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. Whatever he was doing, nobody's arguing was not depraved. Look at the timeline. Miss Melton was murdered sometime between 2 and 4, maybe, when Miss Slobodian left. She had to go to work. Then there's the incident about 7:30, 8 o'clock with Miss Montanez. According to her fiance, Miss Ruiz, was going to work sometime between 9 and 11. She left the house. So the contact between Mr. Wilson and Miss Ruiz is on a road in broad daylight. This isn't some kidnapping in the middle of the night. This is in broad daylight. Again, it's almost a carbon copy of Miss Melton. Again, running over the body 10 to 20 times. Nobody's saying that's not depraved. We're not arguing he didn't do it. There's solid evidence that he is responsible for those 2 deaths and the battery of Miss Montanez. But Miss Montanez's testimony, you need to think about that, whether this was premeditated in terms, Miss Melton had sex with him. He could have just gotten up and left or stayed with her. Instead, he murders her. That's not clear thinking, shall we say. I'm not arguing insanity. I'm just arguing that the state's claiming premeditation, and I'm saying he's whacked out. He's just out of his mind for any of this. The only other point I'd like to make is the burglary. Okay. Burglary of the Amlin house. The second element. At the time of entering, not after you're inside, at the time of entering the structure, Wade Wilson had the intent to commit theft in that structure. No, he was hiding from the police. Remember, this was after the incident with Officer McCormick. He helped himself to the food. I'm not claiming he didn't commit petty theft, but the reason he went into the house is because he was hiding out from the cops. So I don't believe you had a felony. You had a burglary. The judge is going to advise you about a lesser charge of trespass. Again, I respectfully request that you consider whether this was premeditated or depraved mind murder. Now, based on the rules of procedure, I don't get a chance to come back up here. The state does. So I need you to consider what they're going to argue to you in their closing argument, because I don't get a chance to rebut it. I thank you for the attention you've given, and appreciate your assistance in this case. Thank you.
May it please the court?
Yes, ma'am.
Counsel? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was premeditation all day long. The defendant's attitude toward these women was despicable. He bragged about their deaths to his dad after he killed them. No regret, no remorse. And he replaced the name Kristine's mother gave her at birth with the name bitch. I killed a bitch. I choked that bitch out. And 3 days later, he's still bragging about it to law enforcement. And his biggest concern, whether he could get a hamburger and french fries. As Diane Ruiz laid in that field, being scavenged by animals with bugs eating her face to the point where she's unrecognizable, this guy over here wants some french fries. And he's bragging about the fact that Diane Ruiz looks like spaghetti. This is a man with no respect for women, with no respect for human life. When asked about Mila and killing her, he says, there were too many people around. I probably would kill her, you know. You know what I mean, given the chance. Now I want to start with premeditation, because what you're going to see is you're going to see a jury instruction about lesser included offenses. And second-degree murder is a lesser-included offense of first-degree premeditated murder. And there's no doubt that if you read the second-degree murder instruction, you're going to see that it involves ill will, hatred, spite. So there's not a premeditation element, but there's ill will, hatred, and spite. There's no question that he is full of ill will, hatred, and spite. But the law requires you to find for the highest charge. It says, when considering the evidence, you should consider the possibility that although the evidence may not convince you that the defendant committed the main crime of which he is accused, there may be evidence that he committed other acts that will constitute a lesser included crime. Therefore, if you decide the main accusation has not been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, you will next need to decide if the defendant is guilty of any lesser included crime. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't even need to go to second-degree murder. You don't even need to consider lesser-included crimes in this case, because the state has met its burden and proven premeditated murder. And I want to start with the defendant's own words about premeditation and how we know that he took a second to think about what he did before he did it. All right, the truth is, I picked the girl up and killed her. I wasn't worried about the school, you know. Remember, this is during the day. School is in session, and it's an elementary school. Little kids being dropped off by moms and dads and buses. I wasn't worried about school, you know. I choked her out until she couldn't breathe anymore. She wasn't fully dead yet. Now, he's choking her. He could have stopped, but he decided to continue so that he could kill her. She wasn't fully dead yet, and she was still alive, and I pushed her out of the car, and she tried to get up, and I ran her over with the car. And I ran over maybe like 10 times, 10, 20 times, her head, her body. He says, I put the window down, and I said, hey, do you know where the high school is, where the school's at? Could you show me? She said, it's right down there. I said, I drove by there, and I didn't see it. Could you please show me? She got in the car. That's all it took. That's all it took. Got her in my car, and then from there, we drove to the school, and I was going to drop her off. But I knew in my mind, I wasn't going to drop her off. There's the mind. I knew in my mind I wasn't going to drop her off. But she wanted to get dropped off there. I said, okay, you can go. As soon as she went to get out, whatever, I grabbed her by the neck and choked her. That's when I was choking her right there. I was choking her out right there. She came back to life 3 or 4 times. I mean, she was a fighter for sure, I'll give her that. When I pushed her out, she fell out still alive, trying to get up. I backed up and just ran and hit her, ran and hit her, ran and hit her until she was not moving anymore. That's not premeditated murder, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what is. And after Kristine Melton, when he picked up Diane Ruiz, he told the detectives, I was like, you know what? I've already done it once. I'm going to do it again. It came across my mind to murder, just kill, kill, kill. He talks about I could get sex with her, and then I was going to kill her. This is going to sound weird, I'm just really horny. So I was looking for an easy piece of pussy and saw her walking, and she was strolling or whatever early in the morning. So I was like, whatever, I'll give it a shot. When I give it a shot, it usually is 9 times out of 10 works for me. And it did, you know. Fuck it, I should kill her. He says, she did not need a ride afterwards, which is why I started choking her, because she was going to get out of the car. She said, drop me off here at school. I could tell she was getting scared. I saw the fear, and I think the fear triggered me to just kill her. It was going in a weird direction. I could tell things were off because she wanted to be pulled over, and she really wanted to get out of the car bad at this point. And I could tell she was getting, I can sense you, fear. I'm like a fucking lion, and you're the prey, and I can sense it. They can't get away from me even if they wanted to. I'm too strong. I mean, I don't look strong maybe necessarily, but I can, believe it or not. I'm not trying to be mean. I can take either one of you guys down. And this is what he's telling detectives as he's locked up in the Lee County Jail, confessing and bragging to the detectives about these murders that he committed. Not only do you have his own words, all the evidence shows premeditation. Remember when he told his father about murdering Kristine, he says, she's just sleeping there. They had sex. Remember, this is 6 in the morning. Stephanie Johnson has already left. He sees her asleep after a night of going out, having a good time. And he says, I decided I was going to kill her, and I got on top of her. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is classic premeditation. And there doesn't need to be any length of time. It can be just a short swapping at a mosquito. Defense also alluded that, oh, you know, there's drugs and alcohol, and he was on these drugs. That's what he says. But nowhere in the packet of jury instructions are you going to hear, or are you going to read when you take those jury instructions back with you, that drugs or alcohol is a defense to murder or a defense to premeditation. Stephanie Johnson went out drinking the night of October 6th. She went to work the next day. Jason Shepard went out drinking that night, and he did a line or two of cocaine, and he went to work the next day. And Wade Wilson went out drinking. He did a line or two of cocaine, and he killed 2, almost 3 women the next day. Using drugs or alcohol as an excuse for injury or death to anyone is insulting. And you'll find nowhere that the law allows that as an excuse. Think about how he was acting. He's at Mateo's Graphics. Why is he there? He's not just out of his mind talking nonsense. Now, our witness, Mr. Lukic, thought he was out of his mind because he's saying he killed 2 women. That seems pretty crazy. He doesn't think that that's probably true. He did, in fact, know it was true. But he's there to get out of town. He's there for a plane ticket or a bus ticket. This is someone who knows exactly what he did. He's not on some kind of drug where he doesn't know, or he doesn't know what's happening or what's going on. He knows exactly what's going on. And he knows he needs to get the hell out of Dodge. And long after the high of any drugs or alcohol could have worn off, he's calling Daddy. Dad, I need you again. I need money. I need to get out of here. I need you to come pick me up. I need you to help me. And he's bragging to his dad, wanting his dad to be proud of the women he killed. And then 3 days later, when he's in custody and he's on no drugs and no alcohol, what does he do again? He's bragging to the detectives. All those quotes I just read you, those were all 3 days later, when he has no access to any of that. Defense tries to say, you know, he's crazy, he's out of his mind, and the defense, you know, talked about mental health and that being an issue. Again, that's not a defense in this case. There's no evidence of any mental health disorder. There's no, again, no jury instruction that's going to excuse him. Any reference of it by the defendant in a statement is simply an excuse to try to justify what he did. He had no issues going out and having a good time at the Buddha that night. No issues picking up a beautiful young woman at the bar. No issues having sex multiple times. No issues getting exactly what he wanted. He wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't hearing voices. He wasn't confused about where he was. He wasn't confused about anything that night. In his own words to law enforcement, he was a fucking lion and they were the prey. And he could sense it. He liked knowing that they were in fear. He liked knowing that they wanted to get away, and he was not about to let them. And he knew enough that night to give a different name. He was JR, or Junior. He wasn't Wade Wilson, the killer. And he knew after killing someone, he should get rid of the body. He knew that after killing someone, he needed to get out of town. And as he watched the officers search for him, he sat in the Amlin's house drinking White Claw, eating food, using his dad to help him escape. As humans, there's a desire to make sense of it all, to watch the news and come to some understanding of why, to have answers to suffering, and to look for some explanation, to look for a motive to explain why people do what they do. But that's why the state doesn't have to prove a motive. If you had to sit and find a motive or an explanation or an excuse for Wade Wilson's behavior, you'd be in the jury room for years. Because there's no explanation, no justification, and no motivation that could ever explain the suffering and death inflicted on Kristine Melton. The suffering he caused to her best friend, Stephanie Johnson. The suffering he caused to Kristine's cousin, Samantha. Or the suffering he caused to all her family and friends. There's no explanation and no justification and no motivation that could ever explain the suffering he caused to Diane Ruiz. The suffering he caused to her fiancé, Scott. The suffering he caused to her son, Brandon. The suffering he caused to the rest of Diane Ruiz's family and friends. And there's no justification for the fear and the pain and the injuries he inflicted on Mila Montanez. And any explanation he may have given to law enforcement creates no justification. This defendant is guilty as charged, and we ask that you convict him of all of the crimes the state has alleged. Thank you.